Welcome back. Today we are jumping straight into an explainer on one of the absolute most heartbreaking stories ever told. We've previously covered the dad who ate his kids, the girl turned into a monster, and the kidnapping that literally created winter. But today we're re-examining Orpheus and Eurydice. You know, the original Don't Look Back story? For centuries, people have just slapped the label of impatient or foolish on Orpheus. Well, today, we're going to explore why that traditional label might miss the point entirely and uncover the truly devastating real reason he turned around.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Here is a man who literally had the power to charm stones, trees, and even the gods of death themselves. I mean, he walked right into the underworld alive, and Hades actually agreed to let him take his wife back. All he had to do was not look back, but despite all that immense power, he failed with just 10 feet left to go. 10 feet! To really understand this completely devastating climax, where a guy who conquered death lost the whole shebang due to a single glance, we absolutely have to look at who he was before the tragedy.
Before the underworld, these two were the perfect couple. Seriously. Orpheus wasn't just some musician. He was the musician. He was the son of Apollo, the god of music, and the muse Calliope. Eurydice, on the other hand, was a wood nymph. She wasn't a goddess, she wasn't a princess, she was just beautiful, incredibly kind, and completely, deeply in love with him. To grasp the magnitude of what he lost, you have to understand the sheer, almost godlike power of his music. When Orpheus played his lyre, the world literally altered its behavior. Raging rivers would actually stop flowing just to listen to him. Wild, vicious beasts would peacefully lay down at his feet. Even the trees would physically bend toward him. Their life together was extraordinary. They were married in this beautiful meadow, completely surrounded by his magical songs. It was absolute perfection.
But then we hit this jarring, horrific reality. On their actual wedding day, while they're walking through the grass in that very same meadow, Eurydice takes one wrong step. She steps on a viper. There's one bite, and she dies instantly. Just like that, in the blink of an eye, the most beautiful day of their lives is violently ripped away. The contrast here is just deeply, deeply heartbreaking.
And what happens next is totally unprecedented. Most of us would be absolutely paralyzed by grief, right? But his reaction is almost shocking. Orpheus doesn't cry. He doesn't bury her. Instead of mourning like a normal human being, he just picks up his lyre. And that exact moment, he decides to do something no living mortal had ever even attempted. He decides he's going to walk right into the realm of the dead and get his wife back.
This absolute refusal to accept death sets up a seemingly impossible quest. He begins his descent into the underworld through a dark, terrifying cave at Tanarum. Think about this. He is a living, breathing human walking directly into hell, completely unarmed except for his instrument, fully intent on charming the very forces of death.
And it's wild how he actually bypasses hell's ultimate defenses. First up, at the river Styx, Chair on the ferryman tries to stop him, because, absolutely no living passengers allowed. So Orpheus plays. He plays so beautifully that Charon actually weeps and rows him across for free. Step 2, at the gates, Cerberus, the terrifying three-headed hellhound, snarls at him. Again, Orpheus plays, and all three of those monstrous heads fall fast asleep. He keeps walking, past all these tortured souls. His song of absolute grief is so powerful that Sisyphus stops pushing his rock, Tantalus stops reaching for water, and even the ruthless Furies begin to cry. Finally, he stands right before Hades and Persephone, and he doesn't beg them, he sings. He sings about love, a life cut short, and how even gods know grief. It was so moving that Persephone, who knew exactly what it was like to be taken from the world above, starts crying.
Now, what's really fascinating about this part is Hades' response. Hades, the notoriously stern god who famously never ever bends the rules, looks at his weeping wife and actually says yes. But he sets up an absolute, rigid boundary. The condition is crystal clear. Eurydice will follow behind him up to the surface, but Orpheus cannot turn around to look at her until they are both fully in the sunlight. One look, and she is lost forever. It's a miracle, for sure, but with a terrifying string attached.
So begins the impossible walk. And I want you to really put yourself in his shoes for a second and just slow down. Think about what this journey actually entailed. This wasn't some quick, easy stroll to the surface. This was a grueling, agonizing trek through total sensory deprivation.
Imagine being in this environment. Pitch black tunnels, complete and utter darkness. And the absolute worst part? No sound except his own footsteps. He knows she's supposed to be behind him, but he can't hear her breathe. He can't feel her hand. For hours, maybe even days, he walks in the sheer terror of absolute silence. The psychological tension here is just unbearable. Was she really there? Was Hades tricking him with a phantom or a shade? What if he reached the surface completely alone?
You know, the Greeks understood something really profound about the human condition that we often forget. Faith without evidence is absolute torture. This walk wasn't a test of his patience. It was a grueling psychological trial for a grieving, doubting human mind. Sure, Orpheus had charmed death itself with his music, but his music couldn't tell him if the footsteps behind him were real.
The doubt just keeps growing and growing until he finally sees it. The light ahead, sunlight hitting the rocks. He takes one more step, and he is out in the sun. And in that exact second, he turns. He just desperately needed to know she was real, and she was. She was right there behind him, just one step away from the light, reaching out to him. For a half a second, he saw her face, surprise, love, and then pure horror as she was violently pulled back down into the dark, screaming his name forever. So, the absolutely crucial takeaway here is this. Everyone always says Orpheus was impatient. He wasn't. He was tragically human. To label him as impatient completely misses the sheer mental anguish of that dark, silent walk. He was a man deeply traumatized by sudden loss, desperate for just a single ounce of reassurance.
When we compare these two perspectives, the cruelty becomes glaringly obvious. Hades gave him a test designed for a god, not for a grieving husband. A god's test requires absolute blind faith, completely free from any emotional vulnerability. But human reality is broken by grief. A human being who just watched their wife die suddenly needs reassurance. The test was fundamentally incompatible with human nature.
And that brings us to a really compelling thesis. He didn't lose her because he looked back. He lost her the moment she died. Some interpretations of this myth suggest that Hades wanted him to fail all along. The gods never intended for a mortal to actually cheat death. They gave him exactly what he asked for, but with the catch that was intentionally impossible and uniquely cruel. The walk was just Hades being cruel, offering false hope where there really was none.
The aftermath of all this is incredibly somber. Orpheus lived the rest of his life entirely alone in the mountains. He absolutely refused to love another woman. He spent his days playing sad songs that literally made the trees weep. Eventually, a group of wild Maenads, followers of Dionysus, tore him apart because his music just made him feel way too much. But there is a bittersweet end here. After his tragic death, he finally reunited with Eurydice in the underworld. Legend says they now walk the fields together, and he never, ever looks away from her.
Ultimately, this myth isn't about trusting your partner. It's about how grief makes you doubt everything, even a miracle. So I'll leave you with this question to ponder. Which is worse, losing her twice or never trying at all? Really think about that. Drop the word Orpheus in the comments down below if you agree that Hades set him up from the very start. And, hey, let me know which myth we should re-examine in our next explainer. Should we uncover why Pandora's box wasn't actually a box? Or maybe why Athena really turned Arachne into a spider? Thanks so much for joining me today, and remember, keep questioning the stories you think you know.